And so welcome to episode 49 of Teh Tarik with Walid, and I am delighted today, as I always am when I have these sessions. But today I am delighted for a specific reason. We have a media giant with us. I think I have been fortunate enough. I have interviewed 3 media legends as part of my Teh Tarik series: Professor Chiran George, Bertha Hansen, and P.N. Balji. And today I'm gonna interview somebody else who is also a media giant. He has, I think, changed the landscape of the media in Singapore. And this is Mr. Woon, and we will talk to him. He's the founder of Channel NewsAsia, and he is also a best-selling author in the sense that he has helped P.N. Balji and former Foreign Minister George Yeo write their biographies. So without further ado, let me try to invite him. And if you guys have any questions in the chat, and we will address as many as we can. Hello. So this is your first time on Instagram Live, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for doing this. I'm very delighted to have you here. Thank you so much, Taiho, for being here. And I just wanted to start with your experience in CNA, right? And I think Channel NewsAsia has sort of changed the media landscape in Singapore, right? So what was your motivation for starting it? How did it start, and why did you wanna start CNA?
It did not become CNA. There was no grand plan. Remember, it was 1998, and we had the bandwidth. At that time, Lee Chok Yew was the CEO, and he told me, think of something to fill this channel. We didn't want to start an entertainment channel again. We didn't want to do what TV12 then had, which was kids, minority language programs, and the arts. So the only area that did not have a block was news. So we explored a little, but it was daunting because there was CNN, there was BBC, there was CNBC, not to mention the Japanese and the Chinese channels, news channels. So it was daunting, but the more we explored, the more we thought it was feasible, because we were small and we used English. Why is small an advantage? If the channel was started by China and they call it Channel NewsAsia, it would be China NewsAsia and not Channel. And if it was Indonesia, it would also be Indonesia News Channel and not Channel NewsAsia. So small, we had the advantage of not having that much of our own news, so that we can actually report on everyone else's. And also we use English. At that time, we divided Asia into 3 areas: East Asia, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. Did not start big. You know, it was actually just a news belt. But later, when we actually landed in China, it then became a very big deal for us. So there was no, it happened it happened piecemeal, and it did not happen because it was a grand plan.
Right.
When we landed in China, like I say, we had more correspondence, and that gave us a lot of funding to do the channel and do it well.
Did you imagine it would turn out to be what it is today? Could you have ever envisioned this?
No, because in our minds, when we started, I still remember the team that was working with me. We didn't think that it would be big, but when it started doing well, that was 5 or 6 years down the road. Then we started to think, we started to plan big.
Right, right. Thank you so much. I mean, I think it must be satisfying to see CNA turn into what it has turned into today, right? I guess the elephant in the room is when we talk about the media in Singapore, we one of the first things we think about is censorship or government intervention and so on, especially when we think about the Straits Times. But I guess Channel NewsAsia, people don't really have that image of Channel NewsAsia for some reason. So did you experience some form of censorship or government intervention?
Remember, we are not talking about Channel 5 or Channel 8, Surya or Vasantham, where we dealt with Singapore. When we talk about Channel NewsAsia, we are dealing with Asia. And honestly, apart from India and possibly Philippines, the rest of Asia were fairly authoritarian, where media was not free. So when we talk about censorship, we really talk about being sensitive to the of Asia. For instance, I still remember in China, we could not talk about Falun Gong.
Right.
In the Muslim countries around us, we have to walk like we are walking on eggshells because we had to be very sensitive to the Muslim neighborhood. I remember once, it was 4 years into Channel NewsAsia, and I think we mistakenly put out something on Falun Gong. I was summoned to China, and the channel went black.
Wow.
And I had to go to China and explain to China, give the context, basically ask for, basically to say sorry. And
wow.
yeah, and it was still not put back. It was still not put back as a channel only after a few days. So we were subjected to the same kind of scrutiny like CNN and BBC. And we thought that we are Asian country, we would have special privileges. We did not. So honestly, kind of censorship was real.
Wow. So that must have been a real scary experience. Being summoned.
Yeah. What you get used to, because it was not just China, it was Malaysia as well. They thought that they could walk all over us because we are being shown in the country, and if we don't play game, they shut us off.
Right, right. And I think thank you for that. I think a lot of Singaporeans maybe do not appreciate that there are really some things that are no-go areas in other parts of I can imagine in Thailand, for instance, anything monarchy, that's off limits, right? And it's really scary, right? At times. So it's not easy being a journalist in Asia, right? What about in Singapore? Was there censorship? Or if not censorship, did you get into trouble from time to time?
The short answer is yes. I mean, censorship. Remember, we are a country that started only in 1965. We're not an old country, and we inherited many things from the era of Lee Kuan Yew, which was basically top down. And during his time, the relationship between the political leaders and the media were very, very close. So we inherited that. During Goh Chok Tong's time, it was slightly better, but today the scene is quite different. I think social media has in many ways changed that. Every one of us navigates social media. And I think the situation also changed because of how many opposition seats the opposition won in parliament. So that also changed how the government looked at media, but change was social media. Today, I think I was just watching the midterm elections on CNN, and I can tell you this: it is no longer about censorship; it's about who has the more accurate version of the news. So
Right.
if you watch Fox News, for instance, you watch a version of America. If you watch CNN, for instance, you watch another version of America.
Right.
So there is censorship and there's fake news. You
Right.
need to be exposed as much as possible so that you have a more accurate sense of what is news.
Right. How do you feel? I mean, I don't know whether this is off topic but since you mentioned CNN, how do you feel when you watch CNN? I feel very frustrated. They are almost unwatchable. I mean, we know that about Fox News, right? They're very clear about their ideological agenda, right? So, I mean, and try to watch Fox News, but it's infuriating. But at least they're honest about who they are. Right? CNN says they are neutral and non-partisan, but it's not, right? There is a partisan agenda, right? How do you feel when you watch?
I think CNN represents many of the Americans and even foreigners that we meet in Singapore. In other words, they have the sense, they think they are impartial, they think they have the correct version of the world. So you're right. When you watch Fox News, at least they are very clear of who they support. But on CNN, just now I was watching the analysis of the midterm elections. Everyone else was pro-Democrat. And they occasionally allowed the pro-Republican to talk. But really, they were all Democratic supporters. Many sources of news is possible. I think that's our only way to have a more impartial and objective view of the world.
Right. Thank you so much. I think that's really useful. So, Professor Chiran George has talked about a culture of self-censorship in Singapore, right? So it's in the media, but also among the population. So a lot of times there isn't even overt censorship, right? It's just editors or journalists and even the populace. They sort of self-censor themselves because maybe they are unsure where the OB markers are, or maybe they are afraid themselves. Did you experience that throughout your experience? I mean, you have many years as a journalist. Do you think that is a fair assessment that the culture of self-censorship is prevalent in Singapore?
So you're talking about Singapore?
Yeah, Singapore, yeah.
I would say that, as what I said earlier on, because we inherit this very top-down era under Lee Kuan Yew, that element of self-censorship is very difficult to extricate ourselves from, because we are so used to what to say and what not to say. And honestly, also because we live in a multiracial, multi-religious culture, it's not just political self-censorship, it's also cultural and religious self-censorship. We become very careful of what we can say and what we cannot say. But I'll say this, the era of top-down leadership under Lee Kuan Yew, for instance, and I think it also produced some very good journalists. I think they fought back, they tried to push back. Some of them lose their jobs, you know. So for instance, Peter Lim, I mean, he lost his job while doing his work. He lost his job as the editor of the Strait Times while doing his job. And I don't know whether you read Chong Yip Seng's book on...
I did, yeah.
I think he was very clear of what he had in mind when he was doing his job, you know, and he made it very plain that there was a very strong finger in every media platform at that time, you know. So I would say that that strong period, that strong culture of self-censorship also engendered some very good people. Peter Lim, Chong Yip Seng, P.N. Balji, whom I had the privilege of writing the book for. These were the product of that time. Today, I think self-censorship is more diluted because of social media, because of more representation in parliament, and because the youngsters don't understand censorship the way the older generation understood it. And so the powers that be also need to adjust to this.
Right. Thank you. That's fascinating stuff. And I have read that book, and as I was reading that book, I'm thinking about, wow, like what happened to journalism along the way? It seems like there was more censorship, but there was more pushback from journalists and editors, and it was...
After the top pushes down, there is a kind of reaction. The bottom pushes up, you see. So, but today, because there's not that much pushed down because they assume that it's understood.
Right.
We don't have journalists like Peter Lim. We don't have journalists like Chong Yip Sing. We don't have journalists like P.N. Balji.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's a good segue, right? So, how do you think CNA has evolved from the first time you conceptualize it? Although you did say there was no grand plan. How do you think it has evolved over the years?
I think CNA is in a good place. Why do I say that? CNA started out by being video journalism. Today, all media platforms, whether you're print or your video, has to have video video
Right.
offerings. So, and therefore, CNA had a very good head start. If you last generation, no one could rival CNA. They were in a class of their own. So I would say the other media has converged to what CNA is doing. So the real competition to CNA today, I would say, is Mothership. You know, but even then, they are not a real competition because they don't have the studios, they don't have the institutional knowledge. It's evolved and it's evolved quite well.
Right. I think CNA is an amazing addition to the media scene, and it has gained credibility throughout the region. Right. It's not just in Singapore. Right. And would you say it's the most trusted source of news in Singapore?
No, I don't know which source is the most trusted. Yeah, I think there are very many sources coming in. But if you want to talk about regional news, I would say that Channel NewsAsia is the most tapped into news in the region. It's trusted by many Asian countries, but I think some Western news institutions in Asia would not want to admit that they consider CNA an equal, but I would say on many platforms CNA is an equal.
Right. I would say so as well. And I think CNA is trusted also because it has not gone down the route of CNN or MSNBC, for instance, right? And I think it's clear that you're getting news, right? You're not getting opinion journalism, which is fine as well. I think there's a place for it. Yeah, but when people want the news, they go to CNA, right?
Yeah. That's what you want, and because you're a news channel, when they come to you for news, you're happy.
Right, exactly, right. So you have also been a journalist in Myanmar, right? And you have a lot of experience in the region, right? Can you share a little bit about your experience in Myanmar?
Because of my Channel NewsAsia experience, I was asked to start a news channel in Myanmar 13 years ago, and it's called MITV. And 3 years ago, I was again asked to go back to Myanmar to start another channel, an entertainment channel called Channel K. In terms of entertainment, Myanmar is not bad, but there's no journalism in Myanmar. Way back in 13 years ago, when MITV started, it was entertainment and military news. Today, because of the recent coup, it's worse. It's gone back to the years of 2008, and therefore, I would say that the channel I started had reverted to military programming. So it has been a good experience while I was there, but it's an unfortunate and bad situation now because of what happened.
Right. So when you say there's no journalism, is it only they do not allow reporting locally, or so you are free to report about anywhere else in the region?
Myanmar news is not interested in regional news.
Right.
So because Myanmar is a very big country,
Right.
so when they report news, they report festivals, they report social events, they report what the military are doing. But that's why I say there's no journalism as such compared to say the rest of the region. Even Laos and Vietnam are much better.
Oh, are they? Are they? Is Laos better than Myanmar
Yeah.
in this?
So Laos is communist, but it's not military.
Right, right. Okay. Interesting. Thank you so much. So is that pushback from people from the activist type in Myanmar and maybe journalists who see themselves as activists and they want to push the boundaries? Is there such a thing?
There are a few very under social media online platforms that have started, and they have started as a way of revolting and fighting back the military, but it's sporadic and intermittent. It's not strong or forceful. Um, they borrow their satellites from Thailand, they borrow their satellites from Europe. So there has been, or there have been, some sites that provide alternative information for the Myanmar people when they have internet. So one of the reasons why now the Myanmar military is so afraid of the internet is because of this so-called subversive element. But I will tell you something about Myanmar. In Myanmar, social media, especially Facebook and Instagram, especially Facebook, particularly Facebook, is the only way that people communicate because they don't believe in any official military platforms. So Facebook is the only way they communicate, and many of them use what they do to tell other people of their news. It got to a point where if it's not in social media, if it's not on Facebook, it's not happened. It has not happened.
Right.
In, people don't understand it, but Facebook is TV. Facebook is where people get their news.
Wow. Fascinating. Fascinating. So they don't use WhatsApp?
They use WhatsApp, but they use WhatsApp to exchange videos. They use WhatsApp when during the military coup in February last year. There was a lot of videos being exchanged on WhatsApp.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. And are young people in Myanmar different from young people in Singapore from your experience?
They're a lot more hungry. Young people in Myanmar, because of they're very hungry to learn. They're very hungry to learn English.
Oh.
Their English aren't good. Their English isn't good, but they try it very hard to learn. And through Facebook, through Instagram, they also try to expand their friendship to other countries, so that they have friends in Singapore, they have friends in, and some of them are very naked about what they need. I need to learn English. Somewhat sad, but it's also inspiring. And
Right. Thank you. Fascinating stuff. Right. I think you are a survivor, right? To be able to be a journalist in Singapore, in Myanmar. It's amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. So let's move on, right? So you have sort of ventured into a different realm, career path, if you can call it that. So yeah, a best-selling author now. So how has it been writing books versus your experience in CNA? What are the similarities? What's the differences? What are the differences?
you're always on. You are, they can get you anytime because crisis may happen. So that part of CNA I don't miss. I budget a few hours a day to write. Um, and I would say writing, being working in CNA is like the headlines. Working in writing books is like producing documentaries. One immediate, the other one is long form. I prefer to write books.
Yeah, I can imagine. So let's get to that, right? So, did you know? I mean, obviously you are in the scene, so you and Mr. Yon, George Yon knew each other. But uh, what was one thing or a few things that really you found out in the process of writing the book that surprised you for
Oh,
both Balji and George Yo?
uh, writing a book is a very very long event, and you have to be focused. You have to. So, if you want to write, you need to budget a few hours a day to write. So many of my friends don't understand. You mean every day you are not free? I said no, no, no. This time of day I'm not free. You know. Um, so the consistency, you need to develop a certain momentum. So the momentum is good. For instance, when I had weekly meetings with Bauji, when I have weekly meetings with Giorgio. Giorgio is quite a different story. But when I have weekly meetings, you need to sort of, when you are done with that meeting, you need to come back and try to write a first draft of it, you know. And even though it's a slow burn, you need to have very strong discipline. So this is what I understand about, because I was not a very, what should I say, I was not a regular writer until I left Myanmar. And
Right.
since I have written, so, and writing about Baoji in particular, you know, you think you know someone, sit down and talk to them, and talk to them, and talk to them. And you realize that there are things about them that you never knew. Same with, but Giorgio himself, the format with Giorgio is Q&A, you know. So in many ways, Giorgio's book, Giorgio wrote his own book. I think it's very difficult to find someone like him where there's such depth and such breadth. So I would say that with Giorgio, really an inspiration to the book.
Right. Yeah, I mean it's fascinating, you know, and I mean you were there, right, when the first thing he asked me was, yeah, first thing he asked me, are you we started talking about my name and exactly what you said, right? The breadth and depth of his knowledge, and it's very rare, I think, to have a politician who's also an intellectual, and I think for all intents and purposes he is an intellectual, and that's why in the books that volumes 2 and 3 are coming out, of course, but there's so many topics that he's talking about, and not everybody can deal with those topics. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but I mean his command of the issues, right? I think it's quite extraordinary, right? And that must have made writing the book harder, right?
No, 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 no. I think that makes the book. But like I said, Giorgio wrote his own book because that was his mind. You're there as a witness. I was there as a witness. And um, Series 1, Musing, of course, it's a bestseller, you know. But I say Series 2 is better. Yeah.
Wow.
Series 3 is the best. Why
Wow.
Series 2 is better? Because Series 2 travels the world. And Series 2 also talked about his very traumatic and dramatic episodes where 3 of his family members went through cancer treatment. you know, and it was you're on the edge of your bed, edge of your seat, reading it, you know. And but I would say the best book would be series 3 because it is not only wide and deep, but it is also abstract. Uh, there are 2 chapters on Lee Kuan Yew, and there's a chapter on God. There's a chapter on Tai Chi. There's a chapter on calligraphy. So it's slightly different from the first 2 books. All I would say is I was very fortunate to be in my position with George here.
Right. Wow, you're really setting up for people to buy the book already.
Also a marketeer.
Yes, very good one, if I may add. Moving we've already spoken for about 35 minutes. Very, very fascinating stuff. So let's try to wrap up within 10 minutes or so, right? So there are a lot of alternative media outlets, right? You mentioned Mothership just now, right? So what's your assessment of the online media scene in Singapore? And if I could also ask you to comment on the latest entry or entrant, which is Jom Media, right? And do you see anybody breaking the Mothership's stranglehold, right? Or you say maybe Rice Media has sort of established itself as well, right? But do you see anyone coming into this market?
I think the situation is fluid, and why Mothership has quickly taken a stranglehold is because they're focused on younger people. Since they're even faster than Channel NewsAsia. If you visit them, you realize that they are very relatively small outfit. They will tell you, oh, but tell you what, we are not into long analysis. You know, they sort of kind of got a grip of what the media out there needs, or the media consumers out there need. You know, so they have a studio, they do video, they are also on Facebook, they are also on Instagram. So I would say it's difficult to undo what Channel NewsAsia has started, but Mothership is finding another niche.
Right. Would you say it's slightly different though, because or maybe very different, right? Because Mothership is more willing to engage in quote unquote more frivolous stuff, right? Or lighthearted, maybe lighthearted is the word, as opposed to Channel News Asia. And do you think that's the way to go? And do you think that's actually a good thing for consumers of news, right? Would we start to think that, oh, all news should be like this and it shouldn't be heavy, shouldn't be serious, shouldn't be intellectual, but it should be, no?
I think that's why I say Channel NewsAsia is in a good place. You know, have a physical channel that they need to check news, but they also do light news. They also do long form news. You know, but they never have the wherewithal and experience to do that, and that's why they do what they do. But Channel NewsAsia should never forgo what they're strong in, and that's real news, document current affairs. But they also have stuff to rival Mothership. Mothership only has this short, quick news. You know, Channel NewsAsia has a lot. I would not say that they coexist because I think Channel NewsAsia sits on a very comfortable high chair, whereas I think Mothership is just very fast. Over time, Mothership will need to not just go fast, but actually go a little deeper, because you can't continue to just do this, because everyone is doing this.
Right.
Don't go slightly deeper, you will be like everyone else. See, so
right. And is that the structural cause of Straits Times failure, right? Because Straits Times by nature, I mean, you report it the next day and you write longer form articles, right? Whereas if you wanted something immediately from Channel NewsAsia, a lot of times I get things from Channel NewsAsia already, right? Before I get from Straits Times or whatever it is. Do you think structurally Straits Times is at a disadvantage?
Straits Times' Achilles heel is print, and print has been it was defined by print. So it took a long time for Straits Times to get out of that mode. And by the time they almost did, all the others have gone so far ahead.
Right.
I recently did an interview with Straits Times. I saw an interview with Straits Times, doing an interview with on Giorgio. It was a television production number, but I was just observing, and I realized that they're actually quite far behind. You know, it was a television production. So I would say the recent change at the top for SPH was to see if they could revamp the whole thing, so that element of people who, you know, they have put people in there that only digital and visual media. They don't know the print. You know? You need those people who go in there and who just completely revamp the institution, because they will do away with things that no longer are relevant.
Right. So, I mean, I'm sure no matter what, the quality of ST's production was better than my own interview with George. It was literally one phone and one stand. But it was
Maybe you're the future.
but it was a fun interview. I think more fun than the Straits Times interview, which I saw as well, and I thought and I guess one of the things also about the mainstream media is almost there is a mold. There is a mold that is very difficult to get out of, right? Even when I was seeing the interview, like it's very serious, it's very when actually Giorgio, he's very open to, you know, a more light-hearted format and mode, right? Yeah. Yeah, so I feel like do you think it's possible? You mentioned that this remaking or remodeling of SPH, do you think it's possible for Straits Times to never mind regain its glory days, but to match Channel NewsAsia, for instance?
Well, I don't think the people in there would phrase it the way they do, because they still consider themselves quite somebody. And I would tell you this, the government will never allow Straits Times to fail.
That's true. Yeah.
It is an institution that preceded Singapore.
Agreed. Yeah.
That is find ways to improve, find ways to be better. So in fact, I would say Channel NewsAsia, watch out, because they will do something. I don't know what it is, but they will do something to make themselves relevant again.
Yeah, I completely agree with, and I guess that's Straits Times' biggest strength, right? That it is the government will not allow. It's too big to fail. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so just a final series of questions, right? So you have met many people throughout your life, right? Many politicians, and this is a political show, right? So which politicians have surprised you, for better or for worse? Locally, internationally.
I would say Margaret Thatcher and Lee Kuan Yew. Margaret Thatcher came to Singapore. I was producing the interview. Kenneth Leong was the interviewer, and he looked at me and she said, "I will not sit on this chair." And I said, "Oh, why?" I just need something that has a stiff back. You know? So the thing is, stiff backs, you know. And the thing is, when she sat down and she didn't prepare, she didn't do anything. And when Kenneth asked a question, when she didn't want to answer, she just looked at Kenneth. You know?
Oh.
She says, "I will," and she just answered something that was completely different from the question that Kenneth asked. So one of the first thing I learned is you can ignore the question. want to give, you know. But the person that did it very well was Lee Kuan Yew. I followed him 1 year. I think there were a few of us, Sumiko, Fok Kwang and myself. We went to Pakistan, yeah, and he had a very private session with Benazir and Nawaz Sharif, but the amount of information that he had, his analytical mind. You saw Nawaz Sharif. I mean, Nawaz Sharif was in power at that time, but he made it a point to see not just Nawaz Sharif, but also Benazir Bhutto, because he knew that it was a rotating political scene. You could see both Nawaz Sharif and Benazir Bhutto listening to him like he was a teacher. You know, here was this guru that they want to listen to. I mean, I didn't know that. I didn't know that the respect that people had for him was so deep and so strong. You know, that politicians from around the world, I mean, these were just representatives, that they would listen to him and they would take counsel and instructions from him.
Right. And you've never seen this replicated with any other?
No, I see some of it in Giorgio, in a sense that there are many people who would ask Giorgio what he thought, what he thinks, and would be blown away by what Giorgio has had to say, you know, but not in a way that Lee Kuan Yew does it. I mean, he has an audience. These are two politicians that one day, if I may, especially Lee Kuan Yew, you know, one day I may write something about it. You know?
Right. I hope you do. I hope you do. I'm sure it'll be another bestseller, right? So, final question, I promise, right? So, if a young person wants to be a journalist in Singapore today, right, what would your advice be to that person?
Be a journalist. A journalist is a good profession because it keeps you on your toes, it keeps you relevant, it keeps you current, and I'm no longer the person that can give them advice. I would just tell them to, because we are no longer as relevant as they are. You know, we come with tradition, we come with baggage. So I would not give them advice. I'll just ask them to explore it. You know, and be a new kind of journalist. I think someone like you who has a program like this is innovative. It is your own. Not many people can have their own talk show. So they may start something else on another platform. So being a journalist is to be on the cutting edge. Being a journalist is to be fascinated by events around you.
Right. On that very flattering note, thank you so much, Taiwo. I really appreciate. I think you have a wealth of wisdom to share on the media, and I'm sure you can write your own book about the media, right? And I think you should. You know, actually, are you considering it? Yes, about your experience. You know, writing in the media in the region, and why not? Why haven't you written that book?
Not reach a point where I will write about myself.
All right, Taiwo, thank you so much. This was fascinating, and good night. And I'll share the link with you later.